Welcome to an episode where we debate, dissect and navigate the most recent and compelling football league to impact the agents world. With me, Peter Paleologus.
And me, Jonathan Booker.
On this episode of The Agents Angle, we'll bring to you the long-awaited and promised episode on football and agents in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, and with the next transfer window only a couple of weeks away, we reflect back on the impact the Saudi Pro League had on the last transfer window and what to expect this time around.
Also, we will be discussing what it's like to work on one of the high-profile transfers to the Saudi Pro League with an agent involved in one of the prominent deals.
All that to come on this episode of The Agents Angle.
Finally, an episode which many of our listeners have requested, Saudi Arabia and the Saudi Pro League and its impact on the agents' business worldwide.
Yeah, this episode certainly does present an opportunity to present information on a relatively new football world, but also for us to learn about the subject of football in Saudi Arabia and the dramatic emergence of the Saudi Pro League, especially in the last 12 months. Not least as when someone says SPL to me when discussing football, my instinct still immediately has me thinking and referring to Scottish football and the Scottish Premier League. Yet, Peter, I think it more important that we point out that despite many weeks, if not months of planning for this episode, it has proved to be a difficult one to pull together. People seem very reluctant to talk on the subject of Saudi football and the Saudi Pro League, even on the most basic of issues. We've had people willing to come on only to back out later, some saying categorically they won't talk on the subject or are subject to NDAs and confidentiality clauses. And that isn't just agents, it's club officials, but also football regulators.
That's right, Jonathan. We've really tried to put this episode together, and you mentioned NDAs. That was part of it as well. But I want to focus on the positive and what's happening in Saudi, the Saudi Pro League. To set the stage and the background for this episode, I wish to go through a little bit of the structure of the league, who's backing the league, the financial foundations, in other words, and especially the big four Saudi clubs who are getting a lot of backing and signing some incredible players. In terms of our material here, I want to look at a few articles that really talk about what's going on in Saudi. And it's about salaries in the Saudi Pro League, which may be the big haul, but it's more than that. I want to focus on the first article. It's from Breaking Latest News, dated the 1st of August 2023. And the article sets out what's going on in essence. So when we talk about football, the budget of 17 billion euros has been allocated by the Saudi government through various investment vehicles to strengthen and support the growth of the football movement between now and 2030. The apex is the Saudi Pro League through large investments, not just in players, but also infrastructures coming on board and the league itself. There's four flagship teams this article mentions: Al Hilal and Al Nassr from Riyadh, the capital, and Al Ahly and Al Ittihad from Jeddah, the Red Sea port city. These four big clubs are very well supported historically in Saudi football and have a big history, but they're also the promotional vehicles, as this article suggests, for historical and merit-related reasons, being they've won the most championships and are seen as the four brands that really can push this league forward. Therefore, monies come from the PIF, which is the Public Investment Fund, which is the National Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia. Now, in terms of the signings that will happen, that's really a fundamental piece of the Saudi Pro League. This is being managed, the article mentions, directly by the Player Acquisition Centre for Excellence. We'll call it PACE going forward, and provide the clubs with the assistance to sign the players. Now, just briefly, I'll also mention that in terms of 2022 season, in 2023, each Saudi Pro League club can register up to 8 foreign players per season, with a maximum of 7 for league matches. We've also seen a bit of a shift in coaching ranks, and recently in this window, we've seen 6 new coaches, all of who have been Portuguese, and there's been a link to Jorge Mendes as one of the most influential agents in the world being part of those deals. The second article I just want to briefly mention is Saudi Pro League has a long way to go despite spending sprees. This article is by David Rumsey, Front Office Sports. And this article talks about what happened this last summer, that $1 billion was spent on player transfers. The Saudi Pro League is averaging 8,500 fans, which is a 25% increase from last season's attendance. However, it really is trying to build up. So quite an interesting background, but that's the background of the league.
Saudi football is a huge topic, and some of the areas we need to be careful on, but it's got so many facets to it, and we could get dragged into those areas that aren't necessarily related to agents and the agents industry. And this, of course, is the agents angle. One thing it's safe to say, it woke up a lot of people in the football industry in the main 2023 transfer window, including agents, with the profile of some of the players transferred, the number of transfers, and also some of the financial figures being quoted. But I think it's safe to say myself and others question still whether it will be sustained. Yes, financially it can be, but due to the size of the league, the fan base, the geography, and seemingly these 4 flagship clubs funded by the PIF, will the growth be sustained? Hence, I think it will impact on which agents and how many of those agents can access this new market opportunity, or whether it will be somewhat of a closed shop.
Yeah, this is an interesting question for agents. Will it be the super agents or big agencies doing the deals? I've heard that a lot of them are doing the deals. Or will there be scope for the smaller agents to transfer players? I think it'll be a mix of both, subject to having the players, the contacts, and other things we'll discuss further. But I think there is scope for both.
I've also got reservations on the way transfers are reportedly coordinating through this player acquisition centre of excellence, the PACE, as it's sometimes referred to. As for me, looking at it, such mechanisms may possibly result in issues that do not work in the best interests of players, agents, clubs elsewhere, or football as a whole. If they're centrally controlled and the same purchasing decisions and purchasing power come from the same source for 4 key clubs, there's questions to be asked. Some may argue it's akin to a collective bargaining agreement, but there are some key differences in the way this is done to CBAs elsewhere in other sports.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of element of the Major League Soccer, MLS here, which is centralised and players are contracted there. However, I think the setup of the PACE is more than that. It's an earmarked strategy whereby they centralise the recruitment. They want to target the right players to develop the product. This will probably enable them to ensure they're meeting the objectives of the Saudi Pro League and what's expected by the investment. Instead of having piecemeal signings and the 4 big clubs competing against each other for certain players, I think they're trying to have a more controlled approach.
Yeah, I understand from the research that we've done around it, the overall aim of the Pro League is in developing a top league that is self-sufficient without relying on that same public investment fund and government funding, and then to move on and develop its own homegrown talent in terms of players and coaches and administrators, similar to the Saudization in other professions within Saudi Arabia. So whilst there seems to be a lucrative market for overseas players and agents at the moment, will that be sustained with these aims and the player acquisition element, or will we see that talent definitely become homegrown talent from within Saudi?
I think that could be a mix. I mean, we saw Saudi Arabia at the World Cup. We saw that they did very well. They beat Argentina. Of course, they're very competitive in the other games as well. So the homegrown talent's getting better, and also knowing their youth development, they're sending squads to play in Spain and other countries. So there is a big emphasis of that. But it's a long game here too. The power of the big marquee players is also part of this strategy where you want to be a counterweight to the big European leagues and really aim for a big project, which is the Saudi 2030 project. I would say that money is central. However, for a lot of players, the opportunity to be a pioneer in a new exciting league like the Saudi Pro League, to get experience, different cultural experience, is a big attraction. And we also got to remember here with Saudi, just like Dubai, just like Abu Dhabi and the United Arab Emirates, Saudi has always had a major expat scene. There are whopping salaries in Saudi Arabia. It has become a monetary extravaganza for a lot of players. And that's part of the attraction, but it's a sporting league which now has drastically changed the global game. And we need to take that into account. And we know that Cristiano Ronaldo was one of the first players in January 2023 for the Saudi Pro League club Al Nassr, and that piqued the interest in the league.
It's understandable why so many people make this accusation that it's all about the money. And I don't think either of us are naive enough to think that money isn't a key element for both the players and the agents involved. But that's arguably the same as a player moving to the English Premier League, Serie A, La Liga for a huge salary from a hometown club, or even arguably a smaller league elsewhere in Europe. And as I say to everyone, for the players, this is a job. And I don't want to repeat the mantra that gets a bit boring at times, that it's comparatively a short career and can be over very quickly with a career-ending injury, but that is the truth. And I may get shot down for this take, but why shouldn't players take a very lucrative opportunity for them and their families that set them up for life? Then maybe they can go and play for their hometown club for a pittance or even free after their Saudi adventure. I think it was reported in some places that Jordan Henderson's offer was 4 times what he earned in the Premier League. Now, that's just going on that article. We can't confirm that unless you actually see the contract. And I'm not going to get into the ethical and social values debate, as my approach is generally one of when in Rome, do what the Romans do. And I doubt anyone can really force these star players into a move anyway. I do, however, have concerns about less experienced and younger players making such moves, especially at the wrong time, and those moves being motivated by an agent or agency for financial gain. The older players, arguably in the autumn of their careers, I'm less concerned about. It may well be their last big paycheck. But from my experience, and I'm sure there's a lot of agents out there, and you might agree with this as well, Peter, we've all had clients who have had opportunities play in different countries, have a new adventure. Some who, as a conscientious agent, we'd probably advise against it or highlight the pros and cons, irrespective of the potential financial benefits for us as agents. But then again, the agents in such situations, you can't blame that much either. It's a really competitive industry. Agents generally have short representation agreements, and there is little protection for many on the representation agreements they have from having players poached off them, or even if they do a good job, the player being steered towards a preferred agent in the future. So arguably, there is an understandable motivation for those agents to secure that next transfer and or the new contract for a player client, if it be in Saudi or anywhere in the world.
We have a lot of interest for players to come to Australia. However, salary caps, clubs playing gross, there's not that much big salaries in the sense compared to Saudi. However, you also mentioned the agents. One thing that still remains at the moment, especially the agent regulations, is we only got 2 years on our agreement. You can't put a renewal clause in there. A lot of agents would be motivated if big deals came on the table, especially from Saudi. And you mentioned it yourself, we're in a very competitive industry. It's hard to hold on to players. Maybe the bigger agencies have more success, but we are seeing a lot of change in agents lately. So that's a very interesting point. Now, I want to focus on another interesting discussion. Saudi Arabia, is it another Chinese Super League? Some people say there are lessons to be learned from the change in the Chinese Super League, which obviously is not where it was in, say, 2016, 2017, and that the Saudi needs to learn from that model and what happened there. But I actually think that Saudi Arabia and the Saudi Pro League, I'm of the view that it's not a similar project. I just want to refer to one article by Paul McNamara in South China Morning Post, dated the 3rd of December 2023. The article is entitled "The Sky's the Limit. Can Saudi Arabian football pull off what China failed to do?" Now, this is a very interesting article. It goes into what happened in the Chinese Super League, what happened with certain players, when it was at its peak, and then obviously it sort of fell away. But the Saudi Arabian project is a little bit different. And China, what happened, there were other factors at play. The interesting about the article, it also mentions Alexander Ceferin, the president of UEFA, the European football governing body. that he's of the view that the Saudi project is buying players towards the end of their careers. And I don't sort of agree with that, because I think if you look at the list of the players going to Saudi, it's not towards the end of the careers. It may have been in China, but the other difference is Saudi is qualifying for World Cups. China hasn't since, I believe, 2002. And that was also the intended purpose, to help develop the league. So I'm of the view that these are two different projects, and really that if you're going to compare, I think you need to ensure that you've got the full background, and that Saudi is a project that maybe is looking at what's happening in other leagues and trying to get this model right to maybe not just take on the European leagues, but also look at being the premier Asian league, because Asia, for me, is, as I like to call, the football's biggest stadium. It's where most of the fans are. A lot of passion for the EPL clubs and other European clubs, and really huge interest in football across the board.
I just think it's lazy. I think it's a lazy comparison. It's understandable people make the comparison, but to me, they've got the blinkers on. I'm not a socio-political expert on the aspects of sport. You're probably more attuned to that than I am. But I think the motivations for Saudi football are in some ways similar to the Chinese motivations were with the Super League. But in many, many other ways, they're very, very different. And they're two very, very different cultures from what I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I will go into culture a little bit later, but there is, definitely two different cultures. In Saudi Arabia, a lot of the Saudi Arabia and negotiations are very direct. In China, it's a little bit more nuanced. I mean, that's one example, as you mentioned, two different cultures. There are similarities. It's all about results. It's all about delivering quality, but there are differences. And really, for me, the Saudi strategy is a multifaceted one at the moment. The backing of a huge investment fund, 4 big brand clubs, get the league on as many channels and media as possible. Use a very strong national team, which we've seen recently in the Qatar World Cup, which is improving also as a positive promotion tool. Have a centralized strategy where you read the market trends, the players you want, to ensure that you're getting the right fit. And also the big picture projects, a World Cup, Saudi Arabia, and already that's happening. I mean, that was part of the Chinese project, get a World Cup. But Saudi's pretty much making it happen now, looking for support, and you're including the European delegates and countries. And get the superstars, the players that everyone wants to see. So that is the 5-6 point strategy that I think the Saudis have put together quite effectively so far.
I remember being at a football agents event at one of the big law firms in London on the topic of the agency business in China, when the Chinese Super League was very prominent and stealing all the headlines. Now, two things that were quite apparent at the time that are similar to Saudi is that whilst the will of the authorities remained, the project would continue. And the second thing was, it was a matter of who you know and playing by their rules that was all important. And in that way, I think the Saudi Pro League and the Chinese Super League developments are very, very similar. However, as I've already touched on, one personal observation from that time is that there was quite a lot of openness for people to talk about the business side and the agency side of the Chinese Super League. But that doesn't seem to be the case with the Saudi Pro League so much.
I think with the Saudi Pro League, I think they may have preferred agents, but they may have preferred intermediaries who are reaching out to the market and trying to control which players they're earmarking. Obviously, they're talking to the player's agent, but I think they've got a certain strategy where, unlike China, where you as an agent, you can put players like I had. I mean, anecdotally, I had approached Chinese agent for players because Australian players were in demand at a certain time in China. In Saudi, it's maybe they're reaching out a little bit more. And I think I mentioned in that article about those phone calls. So it's maybe a little bit of a different strategy. And you're right, it's maybe not as clear what's going on so much in the agent space and agent negotiations or brokering of deals in Saudi as it was in the Chinese Super League, where people get on a plane and try to put players forward and be accommodated if they had the right player. Speaking of players, and in the last transfer window, and who knows what's going to happen the next one. Very briefly, Al Hilal, they spent net spend of 370 million euros, I believe. Neymar was this Brazilian superstar. He was one of the main players signed there.
Some of the figures reported or quoted may surprise even those in the agents world. The Jordan Henderson one for me, as I've mentioned, certainly surprised me. Probably surprised him and his agents as well, if the offer was 4 times as it's reported. The Ronaldo move was a surprise? No. The Neymar move was a surprise? No. As with the likes of Benzema, Koulibaly, Mahrez and Mane, all players who could arguably still do it in the top leagues in Europe. But I was surprised by some. I was surprised by Kessie. I was surprised by Felipe. And I was surprised by Ruben Neves. Although with that one, I think there are more to the dynamics of the situation behind the scenes once you understand the relationships. But we also have to consider those that didn't happen or were rejected. And will they happen in January? Just 2 names, Mo Salah and Luka Modric. There is also the other thing to consider here, Peter, that will also impact on agents in this window and future windows, and that is loans to and from the Saudi League, as I believe it could well become somewhat of a revolving door. I don't like the idea, but it could happen, especially with limits on foreign players in the Saudi Pro League squads, some being surplus after the last window, after having tens of millions spent on the transfer fee and even more on wages. They weren't even in the squad list. There is Saudi influence and investment in a lot of clubs in major leagues around the world, and ultimately some elements of multi-club ownership. Could this see some agents involved in some high-profile loans rather than high-profile transfers? A lot of people will be keeping an eye on Newcastle United and whether some Saudi superstars will be loaned to Newcastle or vice versa, especially if Newcastle find themselves in with the chance of some Premier League, FA Cup or European glory. And remember that attempt to block such loans was defeated in the Premier League vote just several weeks ago. So this January will be interesting for agents of Newcastle players and or those agents who are linked to Newcastle.
In terms of loans, I mean, even the FIFA statistics in terms of transfer show loans playing a more and more important role in the transfer market. We also, we had players who actually rejected deals. Kylian Mbappe, Al Hilal made a world record 300 million euro bid to sign him. So there were quite a few knockbacks. But one deal that did go ahead to Al Nassr, one of the big 4, was Marcelo Brozović from Inter Milan. And our guest was integral to that deal. I want to introduce our guest. His name is Gad Cohen. He's CEO of AGJ Sports Management. They're based in Milan. He's a FIFA agent and also Italian agent, Agenti Sportivi with the FIGC, the Italian FA. He's a member of the Football Forum, as well as the Italian Football Agents Association. Gad has worked on many Saudi Pro League deals over the last window and once was quoted in saying Paul Pogba needs to prove himself at Juventus before coming to the Saudi Pro League. Welcome, Gad, to the Agents Angle.
Welcome to everybody. I'm very happy to come to your podcast to speak about the Saudi market because, in my opinion, it will be the next 10-year first market in the world. Because everybody knows that the football is not also the fun and the stadium and all this, but it's also the money. And when you have money, you can make all what you want. And they will. But we're not stupid, intelligent.
Yeah, there's a huge interest in what's happening in Saudi. And we've only seen like this last year or so, the Saudi Pro League really get the attention. So it's been a recent phenomenal shift in the football transfer market with the emergence of the Saudi Pro Leagues. Can you tell us, Gad, a little bit about your experience in the Saudi football business and how you see the new Saudi Pro League football landscape?
My experience there, that I make 4 or 5 deals there. One of them go out for the deal of Brozović. My experience is since 20 years when you work with Middle East country, you think that it can be an easy deal, very easy deal. But today, they have also the money, but they have also the intelligence to do it. They know what they want and they know how they want it. I give you a simple example. In 2002, when I start my business, I start with Qatar Pro League in Middle East. With them was easy to make a deal because you have to send just a video of player. They will check and 10 minutes after you can close the deal. Today is totally different. They have a strategy, a big strategy that they scout all the world now. Like we make in England, for example, or like we make in France or in Italy, before to decide if they sign or not a player. And before, you can think that they go on older player, 32, 33, 34, 35. Now they start and they sign, for example, a player in Al Hilal of 25-year-old, one a top player of FC Porto. My experience there was totally strange, to be honest with you. When I start to work with them this year, because it's the first year I work with them, they try to find the people on who they can trust, because there are so many deals that they make them crazy. Because for deal, we are all agents here. You know how the deal, how make the deal, make the deal. When you offer a player to a team, for example, and you are not the agent of the player, start the bullshit on the deal. And they start in January like that. They don't know who is the agent. They don't know who is the owner of the player. They don't know this, they don't know that. So they try to find people with a trust on them that they explain them how they can make a deal. For example, the deal of Brozović, we make this in 7 days. We are all here together and we know how it's difficult to make a deal. So if we success in 7 days, because they have a strategy, an intelligent strategy. And like that, they can now try to bring all the best players in the world. So if tomorrow Erling Haaland decide to go to Saudi, they will sign him without any doubt. Because Manchester City is a big team. But I think, about what I know, that they have 10, 40, 50, 100 times more money than Manchester City. Okay, City can pay salaries of 80 million euro net per year. I think is really impossible. So when you have the money, you can build a big championship. And they have now, for me, one of the best championships in the world. You know, the old Europe thinks that we have the end on all the market in the world. But I think it's finished.
Well, we've seen the signings of Ronaldo, Neymar, Benzema. You mentioned Brozović and others. They were obviously close to Salah as well, which didn't happen, but that doesn't mean it may not happen in the future.
It will be done, I think, next year.
You mentioned the transfer strategy. Is there a difference in the transfer strategy of the 4 big Saudi clubs? And I mean Al Hilal, Al Ahly, Al Nassr, and Al Ittihad in luring these big names to the Saudi League? Or it is basically supported by whoever's funding the project?
These 4 teams, they are teams for the government. So they make any decision without the according of the league. They tell, for example, we want to do a number 10. They give example of number 10, Neymar, for Al Hilal, for example. They give to the league the name of Neymar, and the league will tell, okay, for this deal, we can bring you this kind of money, 100 million, 200 million, we don't know. But without the authorization of the league, they cannot meet or speak with one player. The league decide. You have to bring the player to the league, and the league will tell you, okay, we go or we don't go. Because there is some agent who tell you, Al Nassr, for example, yes, we speak with Al Hilal also. This is impossible, because the league decide where the player go and when he go, and the most important, how much he will get.
Quite a few people, somewhat naively, in our opinion, have been quick to draw the parallels between the recent growth of Saudi Pro League to that of the boom in the Chinese Super League several years ago. Very quickly, how would you explain the primary ways in how the two differ?
We can just know that Europe have the best player in the world today. And this kind of player live, I don't know, in England, in France, in Italy. And for them, it's important to think that they have to fly. Saudi Arabia is 6 hours. Saudi Arabia, you have the sun all the year. Saudi Arabia, they have now a project for 2034 for the World Cup. So they open the country totally. And it's a modern country. It's really a modern country. In Saudi Arabia, you will never, ever get a problem of payment. And when you go to China, for example, you cannot bring your money out of the country. It's not so simple. So I give you a simple example for one striker. To bring his money out, you know what you have to do from China? He buy watch. So he buy for 3 million euro watch, Rolex. And like that, you can bring his money out, because it's forbidden from China to bring the money out. For Saudi Arabia, there is any problem. Sorry for this time of politics thing, but it's like that. To Saudi Arabia, you can come, you are welcome. There is no problem. Just don't talk about politics there. That's it.
Gad, what are the main challenges faced by agents and the players they represent in Saudi Arabia? What are the main adjustments and adaptations that they have to do to operate in Saudi Arabia, to bring players to Saudi Arabia?
To have the key. And maybe I am the key also for agent who want to work there. We have a very good contact with the league. So if any agent want to work to Saudi Arabia, my phone is totally open. But like I repeat, we want really to bring up and up the championship and the league. But we ask to bring top, and I repeat, top player. They have a strategy for 2034. Okay, the sporting thing is not Premier League, but sometime when you can get 30 million euro net per year and save all your life. Because we are football agents, you know that the sporting thing, okay, but the most important in the contract is what? Is the money. I think this is the big difference. And all this team play Champions League. Okay, Champions League for Asia. I don't know the level exactly. Maybe it's a big level. But the money is the most important. If some people who listen to this podcast have a top player to bring there, we are open to discuss. Totally open.
And when they do make that move, whether it be agents working with yourself within the Saudi market or players moving there, what are the cultural adjustments that they have to make, or that they have to appreciate the differences? What would be your advice on that?
To explain you one thing important, very important. The rich Saudi people live in Europe, so they have a cultural thing from Europe. So don't imagine if you go there, you will see them with a dress from Arabic thing. No. They are totally modern. If you want to meet them, you know where you have to go? I go to give a secret now. You have to go to one of the biggest hotels in Paris. And they are cultural, like the culture of them there is totally European culture. If tomorrow you want to work there, you want to bring your associate there, you have to be a European guy because they like the European guy. They prefer to work with European agents. See all the transfer, from where did it come? See all the agency work there. It's only agency from Europe. Since January to September, the people who decide for the transfer there, they live in Europe, especially in Paris. So if tomorrow you want to make a deal there, go to the Georgia 5 hotel in Paris. You go to meet them.
I want to delve more directly into the agent role. You've got a lot of experience in the football world, especially in agency, and being based in Italy as well, one of the bigger markets in the world. If I were to ask you to sum up the agents industry right now as a whole in one word, what word would it be and why?
Crazy. Only crazy. My question, and you know, the people who don't work in the football business ask me all the time the same question. But why the player need agent? And I tell to them, if you come one day with me in meeting, you will understand why I tell one word for this market. Crazy.
In order to work in Saudi Arabia, we know that FIFA's brought in the new football agent regulations in terms of the 1st of October. They brought in exams, or previous agents might have got a legacy license, or agents in France and I think also Italy, they have their own system.
Also, yeah.
To work in Saudi Arabia, do they ask for the FIFA license? Is it they look for agents who are regulated? What's the situation?
You have to get a FIFA license. You have to get a FIFA license. If you want, I can tell a word about this regulation. Because for the football forum, you know that I am a member of the football forum.
Yes.
I think what FIFA make is totally crazy. What should, if tomorrow one team want to pay you 10% of commission or 20% of commission, it's forbidden. Why? They break the regulation in 2015. Why should FIFA have to decide how much you have to get commission? I don't decide for the salaries of the president of FIFA. I don't decide about the salaries of the secretary of FIFA. They have no other problem in the football business. Why they come start to make a regulation like that? Okay, you want that we get a license? I have no problem. But why you want to decide how much commission we will get? They make our job. They know how it's difficult to make a deal. They know how it's difficult to bring young player to a top level. And in the end, you bring him there and maybe you lose the player. Who will refund you all the money that you spend? Who will pay my trip? Who will pay my hotel? So please, they have not to decide how much you have to get a commission. I have simple question for the president of FIFA. What is his problem if I earn 10% or 3%? You know what is his problem? Is the lobby of the team. That's it. The team are happy when we help them to bring player. They are totally happy. So tomorrow you make a business, you decide that your price is 100,000 euros to make a business. Why should the president of FIFA will decide for you? And to answer to a question, there is the FIFA regulation then in Saudi Arabia. You know that some agent without license can work. There is the same regulation like in the world. But for the commission, there is not the regulation. For the amount of the commission, I'm talking.
In Saudi Arabia.
And they want the player, they pay you as you deserve. Because who can imagine that a player like Brozović can come to Saudi Arabia this year? There is a work. You have to convince the player to go there. Okay, the money is good. No problem about that. But do you think that in June, when he played League Nation in Europe, Brozović, with his national team, you think that he think about Saudi Arabia? For him, he stay in Milano. We make a work, and they pay for this work. It's normal.
In terms of being a successful agent in Saudi Arabia, you mentioned that obviously a lot of the European agents control a lot of the players that are in demand there. To establish the strong relationships with the clubs and the Saudi Pro League, what qualities or attributes should a football agent have?
You have to be serious. No lie, no story, to be serious. And to start to think that he will not steal the money of the country. Okay, sometimes there is a big salaries, but sometimes you have not to be crazy. Your player have a value of 20 million euro or 15 million euro. It's a lot of money. 15 million euro net per year. Don't start to think that you will get 80, 100 million per year. I give you an example. Read the newspaper, you will know who is the deal. We have to bring the player to Al Hilal, a famous striker, one of the best in the world at this time. But he never win the Ballon d'Or. And when we make the meeting there with the president of the team, tell to the president, I want 100 million euro net per year. And the president tell to him, he stopped to talk and ask, he tell, listen, player, how much Ballon d'Or you win in your life? He tell, 0, no Ballon d'Or. Okay. So why should I have to pay you 100 million euro net per year? You are crazy, my friend. He tells like that. There is no deal. The discussion is closed. They break the deal. They are like that. They are directly. But if tomorrow you show them that you can convince what they want, and you ask them, for example, 5 million euro commission, they will pay it. And for this, they are totally honest. If you tell them, listen, we can close this deal, but I want 2 million euro commission, they are happy after the deal. You can be the king there. You can really be the king there.
In terms of the Saudi Pro League, do they have a panel of agents that they select in order to approach players? Do they have the preferred agents or agencies that they want to work with? Or it depends on the player who's targeted and they deal with that agent? Do they have their own club agents in terms of trying to get those players?
They will talk with the agent of the player, for sure. But if they need help, for example, to bring out one player because you have good connection in Australia or you have good connection in England or have good connection in Italy or in France or in Europe, they will use me to close the deal. But one thing is for sure, if one player tells this is my agent, they will work with the agent. You know they have to make it clean. They have no choice. But they will not fire an agent, for example. If it's your player that they want, they will work with you. Only if you are crazy, they will not do. But if you are serious, I tell you honestly, if you are serious, they will pay you a good money that you cannot imagine. But you have to be really serious with them. If they close you on the market, you can think that for all the life, your door is closed in the market. The big example that we have is Messi, who swear them that he will come. When he go to Qatar for the World Cup, no one knows this, but I give you a secret now. When he go to Qatar in November for the World Cup, you know that he was in Saudi Arabia? He go there to negotiate his contract. And they was totally pissed off about what he did. So maybe the door is closed now. Maybe not, because it's Messi. But if another player make this, the door will be totally closed.
Gad, as you've rightly pointed out, it isn't just the Saudi Pro League and bringing players there. It's also about the investments that Saudi is making around the world in football. And it's truly a global game, and we're seeing investments in clubs around the world. Now, there was a vote by the English Premier League clubs whether to ban related party loans. So between clubs that are under the same funding umbrella, under the same ownership, do you think many agents may look at this as an opportunity, or are we underselling the Saudi Pro League that once players have gone there, as you've said, the sun's there, the lifestyle's there, they'll want to go to other leagues on loan? Do you think there's an opportunity there for agents?
Yes, can be. But you know that front of Saudi Arabia are not just Newcastle in England. There are other teams. It's not a secret. They have other teams in England. So I think there will be a big turnover. You know why? Because when the team, for example, one team in Saudi Arabia lose and was not qualified for the next round for Champions League in Asia, they can no player in January to their team there. Imagine one player have 30 or 25 million net in Saudi Arabia. So it means 2 million net per month. And I think they will learn some player in Chelsea and Newcastle. You will see. For January, there will be a lot of movement, I think. But I give you just one indication. You will remember it in February after the market in January. One of the biggest players in England will leave for Saudi Arabia.
Are we going to see a busier January to the summer?
January to summer, yes. You will see. He's on the way now. I tell you why. Because you know that Neymar was injured. So Al Hilal have to replace quickly Neymar with a big name. He is not Mohamed Salah. You will get the indication the 1st of February, I think.
Saudi Arabia is actually hosting major sporting events for some time now. How do these events impact the local football scene? Obviously, we're hearing about the 2034 World Cup. Is that the long game, the long plan for Saudi Arabia to really become a major sporting event destination and football being at the center of that?
You remember what Qatar did? They want to do the same, but 10,000 times more. The only target for them is 2034. So they will make all what they can do to bring top images of the country in the sport, in another thing. The target of the country is 2034, the World Cup. After this, we don't know. Before, I can tell you they will spend a lot of money. So I repeat myself, the football business, not the football business is just question of money. And who tell me is wrong, for me is a liar. Because all of us and our best friend FIFA know this. Football is one thing. Football business is other thing. Football business is not question of them. It's just question of money. When you have the money in football business, you can make all what you want. Take time. The example of Chelsea, 10 years to get the Champions League. But in the end, you will success.
Personally, for you, Gad, what is probably the most memorable or particularly rewarding experience from your football agency career that's left a lasting impact on your approach to the football business and sports management generally?
So I will tell you something. Now it's in 2008. So now we can talk about it. We have to bring one player from Netherlands to Russia. It was Alphonse Martin Vasquez, I think. He played in Arabian. And so I speak with one team from Russia for him. And they asked me, okay, Gad, let's go. What is the amount of the transfer? And me, I tell them, we can bring the player for 10 million cash. We go to Netherlands, we make the meeting, and we sit in the table of the discussion. And when the CEO of Arabian tell, okay, it's okay, agreed for 10 million euro, the people of Russia opened the bag with 10 million euro cash. The guy of Arabian, I think he was totally shocked. Me also, because who see 10 million euro cash in the bag like that? And I remember I was my collaborator with me. I tell them, listen, don't move, because if you touch one of this money, they will kill you, I think. And what my most funny, because I explain you this, because I live this. But if someone of you live this with me, I think the next 10 years after, you'll remember of this story. He bring 10 million euro in bag cash. Because for him, cash is the money with you, not one transfer in one time. Difficult in the time that we were there, but funny when we talk about this. When you ask me one word for football business, you remember, I tell you crazy. This is crazy.
From Asia and also Africa, speaking to a lot of agents. A lot of agents are quite keen in getting players into Saudi Arabia, but obviously they don't have the bigger names that the big four in Saudi Arabia are looking for. But for agents who want to get players into the second division, which can be quite lucrative, or even the third that they're setting up in Saudi, is that possible in terms of without having the relationships, or they need introductions to those clubs? What would you recommend, Gad? Because this is more for obviously the smaller agents who want to get involved in the market and have good players, but are looking more at the second or third division of Saudi.
The market works like that in second and in third division. First of all, they make the transfer for the big four team. But the big four teams, sometimes they have foreigner. So they have to bring the foreigner to other team before to sign player. Now we have 8 foreigner, I think, something like that. They can have 8 foreigner. So they sign to the other team in first division, the foreigner that they have. And the player who they are in the other team, where they sign the foreigner, go to second division. You can enter in the second division market, but it's not interesting. But if they want to bring player for the small agency, they can work with all the team. There is Al-Shabaab, another team there. You can work with them for lots of players. There is Al-Arabi. There is all these teams. You can work with them. But if tomorrow you want to make really a deal there, you have to catch top player. Because only these 4 teams for the fund pay the money. But if you want to go there, I don't know, to earn 10,000 euros, bring your player in Europe is the best. So, I mean, they can bring player from Africa, for example, in second division. They can bring young, not top player in first division. But the market will start for this middle of July, end of July, when the big team have signed all these best players. Because I repeat, they bring the foreigner for the big team to the smallest team in first division. The smallest team in first division bring the player, the foreigner that they want to quit to the second division. And I give you an example. The salaries in second division is $400,000 net per year. I think we can get the same in championship.
And one final question for you, Gad, just to close. Either in terms of Saudi Arabia or the football world as a whole, if you had one wish for the football agents industry going forward, what would it be?
My wish for the football agent?
Yeah.
Let us work free. That's it. It's my new message to FIFA. You know, since 25 years we work, seriously. I mean, in all the job, there is people bad. Because this story of FIFA make me crazy, I tell you honestly. Totally crazy. When FIFA negotiate the TV right for the World Cup, should I can tell to the medicine guy, not more than 100 million euros. You think that they will accept it? And I repeat myself, it's the lobby of the team make it. They're happy when we sell player for 100 million euros, I think, the team. Why should you have to decide for me how much I get for this? Let us work free. You are not to decide about our commission. We don't decide for your TV right. We don't decide for your marketing. Don't decide for our commission. It's totally strange for me. Totally strange.
And I think that sums it up quite succinctly, Gad. Thank you so much for your time and your insights.
It's a pleasure.
Some really fascinating insights there.
Thank you very much.
I wish you all the best. No doubt a busy January ahead for you.
And I repeat before we close, all the agents who have top player and want to bid to Saudi Arabia, my phone is open.
And there you go, folks. Thank you very much, Gad. You take care. All the best for the future.
For you again. Bye-bye.
Now, Jonathan, Gad provided a very thought-provoking analysis. He's an agent who has the acumen and awareness into the Saudi Arabian football dynamics, Saudi Pro League. And basically, to sum it up for me is you need to have the right players, the in-demand players. You need the key, big emphasis on the key, relationships and trust, and also be able to navigate the ambitions of the clubs in the Saudi Arabian Pro League.
It's fascinating where Saudi football will actually go in the future and how far it will go. It's a rapidly transitioning country. It's got huge wealth, passionate fans. It's quite clear it's not a plaything or political statement. It does seem to be a commercial decision and part of a far bigger plan for the country as a whole, the 2030 vision. So with the financial clout that they've got and the growth, there should be opportunities, not just for players and coaches, but agents as well. But I need to say, it does seem to me at the moment it is a closed shop, if not centrally controlled and a secretive shop, even from our experience with putting this show together. Is there a limit on the growth within Saudi Arabia based on the fan base and the geography, or will the potential broadcast and commercial revenues make up for that? Or is it part of a bigger project in the future, dare I say, akin to the European Super League? Some have commented it may be a threat to European football and the European football competitions through UEFA. And I reference a BBC article by Simon Stone, which is the Saudi Pro League, European football, is not in danger from Saudi spending. I don't think it is. In fact, in ways, it may well help European football, if only financially. Yes, the likes of the English Premier League may suffer in terms of broadcast revenues. Who knows? We just don't know. We'll have to see where it goes. There are no doubts there will be opportunities for agents off the back of the Saudi football growth. But what opportunities and who they will be available to, I think is incredibly uncertain at the moment.
Yes, I agree that for agents, there are opportunities in the Saudi market, especially if they have elite players. We're looking for a compelling financial offer and cultural change. You actually mentioned that article. And in that article, one thing that the Europeans, I would say, that want to see a change is for the transfer windows to align, because the most recent transfer window, Saudi Arabia closed, or the Saudi Pro League closed 7 days after the European windows. But that's also important for agents, because how are they going to leverage their deals? Do they wait for that Saudi extra 7 days, or do they get signed up? So that also has a big impact on the agents. But also for agents, smaller clubs in Saudi, they provide opportunities for smaller agents if they've got the right players to do deals. So we need to take that into account. But in Asia generally, from my experience, your players need to deliver results as a reflection of the agent who gets those players into the market. But also it's about trust, transparency, personability, and understanding. I will also mention this. The Saudi are trying to develop a product that's easy for the TV as well. That's part of the strategy, that it's not just about the big wages. They're trying to develop a product and get it on screens and get people to get some eyeballs watching that product so it can look good. So it's all about messaging as well as about the players and the league itself and who the investors are.
The one thing I think we're getting very mixed messages on is the cultural aspects of Saudi Arabia and operating there as an agent, or any role in football for that matter, whether it be a player, a coach, or even a football administrator. Obviously, for some, there will be a certain amount of leeway given their profile and importance. And I think one thing is the exception that's been made for Ronaldo, who cohabits with his partner. They're not actually married, which is quite a conflict with Saudi law and principles. But I can only see exceptions being made that aren't a step too far in regards to the laws, values, and expectations of the country and the Saudi people. I doubt you can go to Saudi Arabia and expect to live a Las Vegas lifestyle, even though there was an article in The Sun that spoke about that and spoke about how super rich stars switching to Saudi will be able to live above the law to booze and party. But I find this very difficult that the Saudi patience and the elements of professionalism will allow for that. On the subject of experienced players and agents, they're pretty good at embracing new cultures. And although it isn't true of everyone, and I've had examples of players here in England from London having trouble adapting in the north and vice versa. So that's just a matter of the same country and a few miles. There's always a transfer market and there's always replacement players in the market. And some of those who moved in the summer may well move on and be replaced by other people. Younger players, as I said earlier, I'm not so sure about. Maybe those with an appreciation of the Muslim faith, it would be an easier transition. There was an article featuring Karim Benzema from The Athletic that highlighted the importance of his Muslim faith when deciding to move to Saudi Arabia. Yes, some may argue it's all spin and PR, but quite a few of the star players who went to the Saudi Pro League in the main 2023 window, I believe, are from a Muslim faith background. It is a modern country in so many ways. It is a wealthy country and it's rapidly evolving, but it is quite clear that the faith, the values, the culture, and the social rules are still highly important. And that again brings us back to having the right contacts there. And as we have heard in other countries, working with agent partners and key contacts who know the country and know the culture is vitally important.
The business culture in Saudi Arabia is quite different. There are certain things you need to know about when you're negotiating with football clubs or generally in business. There are certain cultural dynamics that are at play. If the meeting's held at the Saudi club or counterpart's office, it's expected you'll be treated very generously. Tea, coffee, sweets are usually served. Saudi meetings are not always structured and there might not be an agenda. So really there could be discussions about family or other things before you get onto the topics of football. Also, we mentioned Benzema and the Muslim aspect. Meetings are scheduled maybe around daily prayers. And also that the weekend in Saudi is a bit different. The Friday and Saturday is the weekend. Now, sometimes in Saudi, there is a general lack of urgency in business dealings. Decisions may be made slow. But I would say in the football world, because of the transfer market and the transfer windows, those decisions may be a little bit faster. Now, in terms of Saudi business culture, and I think Gad alluded to this, personal relationships play a large role. Saudis prefer, it's a generalization, of course, but also from what Gad said, prefer to work with those they know, and face-to-face meetings are the ideal way of doing things. Also, business is very hierarchical there based on age and position, and that's got to be taken into account. And finally, in business culture, maybe not in football culture, because we need contracts. In Saudi, people can agree on contracts, adhere to them on basis of trust. But also Saudis also are big on word-to-mouth promises, so that should be taken into account. And finally, which probably a similar trait to China, I would say, that Saudi business people or clubs invite their partner to meals, to dinners, to lunches, to build the personal relationship. It doesn't always happen in the office. It's a gesture in a lot of Asian markets and very much in the Saudi market of good faith in the business relationship that you attend. And we will put in our links, a very interesting article from Cultural Atlas, which talks about Saudi business practice, which is very insightful for agents who want to do business or want to understand the market there, Jonathan.
But what about the other buzz topic in the football world and also that relates to football agents? So we're talking about Saudi Arabia and Saudi football, which is huge. But the other big area that's rapidly growing and developing is, of course, women's football. So it is worth looking at the combination of the two. And again, going back to our friends at The Athletic, they had an article looking at Saudi Arabia and what's next for women's football. Is it the next frontier? Now, if mixed messages weren't enough when talking about the men's game in Saudi Arabia and the reluctance of people to speak about that, it is even more evident from this article in The Athletic with the women's game. Even established football nations need to be careful, however, on the topic of women's football and the developments in Saudi Arabia. After all, in the English professional women's game, although not necessarily banned, it wasn't permitted for professional women's team to play matches on league grounds for some 50 years, and that only ceased in 1970. And there is arguably even a bigger step for women's football in Saudi Arabia. But then again, in the 5 years of women's football and Saudi Arabia, it's come a hell of a long way. When you consider in Saudi Arabia, women were banned from football stadiums until 2018. The Women's League in Saudi Arabia wasn't established till 2019. And the Saudi women's national football team wasn't established until 2021. Yet now we see the clubs in Saudi Arabia recruiting players who've played in the Women's World Cup. They've played in the top women's leagues around the world. And we also have female head coaches. So with the growth in the Saudi Pro League in such a short space of time in the men's game, and the surrounding cultural changes, what is to say the same cannot be achieved in the Saudi women's football landscape? It might happen, it might not. It's going to be far more complex. But it is important to remember that there are mixed messages coming out on this subject, depending on who you speak to and what you read. And the article in The Athletic highlights this factor.
Yes, you're talking about an article in The Athletic. I think it's called The Special Report, Saudi Arabia Women's Football, The Next Frontier from October 2023. In my view, I think there's a concerted effort for all countries to invest in the women's game. Saudi Arabia is no exception to that. We're talking here a $17 billion budget, or euro budget, I should say, allocated by the Saudi government and the investment funds to strengthen and support the football movement and other projects up until 2030. And definitely part of this will go to the women's game. So as you mentioned, the recruiting top players and coaches.
I think even after all the planning and efforts we put into trying to get this episode out, Peter, it leaves us with so many questions with regards to Saudi football, where it is and where it's going. It goes without saying we're hugely appreciative to Gad for coming on and sharing his knowledge and insight. Plenty of others said they would do the same and then weren't allowed to or said they couldn't. So when you have very highly rated football and sports lawyers saying they can't speak about their widely publicised involvement in transfers to the Saudi Pro League in 2023, club advisors saying they cannot talk about it due to confidentiality agreements, agents being cagey, and we know many football agents, the problem is getting to keep them quiet on most occasions. And even football regulators saying they can't get permission to talk about very basic issues such as football regulations. It is hugely frustrating, disappointing, and understandable that people in football, not least agents, whilst attracted to the Saudi football opportunity, they are understandably wary. Not least as it will be Saudi Arabia who will be hosting the next FIFA Agents Working Group in just a couple of weeks' time. It leaves us with questions, no doubt leaves others with questions, and with the uncertainty, I would personally be wary of getting involved in Saudi football at this time. And on the subject of questions, if you do have any questions for us here on the Agents Angle, please don't hesitate to send those in either by email, on social media channels, or via Spotify. Also, we have seen and heard comments from a few people saying they've only recently found the podcast and wish they had found it earlier, as it is a bit different to other football-related podcasts. So if you know someone either professionally or socially who you think may be interested in the show, or a specific episode for that matter, please share the show and the link with them. So with that, until the next episode, it's bye from me.
I want to mimic that, Jonathan. Please leave us a review. And we're the only ones that provide the agent's angle on a lot of these topics and what's going on in the agent's world. Bye from me.
The purpose of the Agents Angle podcast is to provide news, information and facilitate discussion on regulatory matters, policies, business trends and issues affecting football agents worldwide. The opinions and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only and should never be considered legal or professional advice. Furthermore, The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Thank you for listening.